Old Saxon, also known as Old Low German, is a Germanic language and the earliest recorded form of Low German. It belongs to the West Germanic branch and is most closely related to the Anglo-Frisian languages. It is documented from the 8th century until the 12th century, when it evolved into Middle Low German. It was spoken on the northwest coast of Germany and in the Netherlands by Saxon peoples. It is close enough to Old Anglo-Frisian that it partially participates in the Ingvaeonic nasal spirant law. It is also closely related to Old Dutch. The grammar of Old Saxon was fully inflected with 5 grammatical cases, 3 grammatical numbers and 3 grammatical genders. The dual forms occurred in the first and second persons only and referred to groups of 2. For a long time, Old Saxon and Old Dutch were not distinguished and often thought to be different dialects of the same language. However, while these two languages both shared the same historical origins and some very similar writing styles, Old Saxon shows a slightly reduced morphology compared to Old Dutch, which kept some grammatical distinctions that Old Saxon abandoned. There are also various differences in the phonological evolutions, Old Saxon being considered as an Ingvaeonic language whereas Old Dutch is an Istvaeonic language. Characteristics. Relation with other West Germanic languages. Old Saxon probably evolved primarily from Ingvaeonic dialects in the West Germanic branch of Proto-Germanic in the 5th century. However, Old Saxon, even if it is considered as an Ingvaeonic language, is not a pure Ingvaeonic dialect as Old Frisian and Old English are, the two latter sharing some other Ingvaeonic characteristics, like the great vowel shift that took place in both Old English and Old Frisian. This, plus the large number of different forms that the language took, often showing different West Germanic features, led some philologists to mistakenly think that Old Dutch and Old Saxon were variations of the same language, and that Old Saxon was indeed an Istvaeonic language. In the Middle Ages, a dialect continuum existed between Old Dutch and Old Saxon. This was only recently interrupted by the simultaneous dissemination of standard languages within each nation and the dissolution of folk dialects. Despite sharing some features, a number of disparities separate Old Saxon, Old English, and Old Dutch. One such difference is the Old Dutch utilization of a as its plural a stem noun ending, while Old Saxon and Old English employ as or os. However, it seems that some Middle Dutch took the Old Saxon a stem ending from some Middle Low German dialects, as modern Dutch still shows the plural ending s added to certain words. Relation to Middle Low German. Old Saxon naturally evolved into Middle Low German during the 12th century, but the evolution from Old Saxon towards Middle Low German was long and uninterrupted. It took about 200 years to evolve the language. However, 1150 marks the inceptive period of profuse Low German writing wherein the language is patently different from Old Saxon. One of the most striking differences between Middle Low German and Old Saxon is in a feature of speech known as vowel reduction, that also took place in Middle Dutch and Middle English, while round vowels in word final syllables were rather frequent in Old Saxon. In Middle Low German, such a level to a schwa. Thus, such Old Saxon words like gesprochen and dago became gesprochen and dagi. Phonology. Early developments. Old Saxon did not participate in the High German consonant shift, and thus preserves stop consonants p, t, k that have been shifted in Old High German to various fricatives and affricates. The Germanic diphthongs un o consistently develop into long vowels e o, whereas in Old High German they appear either as e a or e o depending on the following consonant. Old Saxon, alone of the West Germanic languages except for Frisian, consistently preserves Germanic j after a consonant e. e.g. Helion, savior. Germanic umlaut, when it occurs with short a, is inconsistent, e.g. Hebian, habian, to have. This feature was carried over into the descendant language of Old Saxon, Middle Low German, where e.g. the adjective crank had the comparative forms kränker and kränker. Apart from the e, however, the umlaut is not marked in writing. Consonants. The table below lists the consonants of Old Saxon. Phonemes written in parentheses represent allophones and are not independent phonemes. Notes: the voiceless spirons f, theta, and per second gain voiced allophones when between vowels. This change is only faithfully reflected in writing for. The other two allophones continued to be written as before. Fricatives were devoiced again word finally. Beginning in the late Old Saxon period, stops became devoiced word finally as well. Most consonants could be geminated. Notably, geminated v gave bb, and geminated probably gave. Germinated par resulted in XX. Germanic *h is retained as in these positions and thus merges with devoiced. Vowels. Notes: long vowels were rare in unstressed syllables and mostly occurred due to suffixation or compounding. Diphthongs. Notes: the closing diphthongs a and our sometimes occur in texts, probably under the influence of Franconian or High German dialects, where they replace Old Saxon developments and. The situation for the front-opening diphthongs is somewhat unclear in some texts. Words written with io in the Helion, the most extensive record of Old Saxon writing, are often found written variably with ioa or even ie in most other texts, notably the later ones. The diphthong eventually merges into e in almost every Middle Low German dialect. There also existed long diphthongs, ou, au, and eu. These were, however, treated as two-syllable sequences of a long vowel followed by a short one, not proper diphthongs. Grammar. Morphology. Unlike modern English but like Old English, Old Saxon is an inflected language, rich in morphological diversity. It kept several distinct cases from Proto-Germanic: the nominative, accusative, genitive, dative and instrumental. Old Saxon also had 3 grammatical numbers and 3 grammatical genders. The dual forms occurred in the first and second persons only and referred to groups of 2. Nouns. Old Saxon nouns were inflected in very different ways following the classes. Here are the endings for dag, day, and a stem masculine noun. At the end of the Old Saxon period, distinctions between noun classes began to disappear, and endings from one were often transferred to the other declension, and vice versa. This happened to be a large process, and the most common noun classes started to cause the least represented to disappear. As a result, in Middle Low German, only the former weak and stem and stronger stem classes remained. These two noun inflection classes started being added to words not only following the historical belonging of this word, but also following the root of the word. Verbs. The Old Saxon verb inflection system reflects an intermediate stage between Old English and Old Dutch, and further Old High German. Unlike Old High German and Old Dutch, but similarly to Old English, it did not preserve the 3 different verb endings in the plural. All featured as ad. Like Old Dutch, it had only 2 classes of weak verb, with only a few relic verbs of the 3rd weak class. This table sums up all the 7 Old Saxon strong verb classes and the 3 weak verb classes. It should be noticed that the 3rd weak verb class includes only 4 verbs. It is a remnant of an older and larger class that was kept in Old High German. Syntax. Old Saxon syntax is mostly different from that of English. Some were simply consequences of the greater level of nominal and verbal inflection, e.g., word order was generally freer. In addition, the default word order was verb second, very close to that of modern Dutch or modern German. There was no support in questions and negatives. Multiple negatives could stack up in a sentence and intensify each other, which is not always the case in modern English, modern Dutch, or modern German. Sentences with subordinate clauses of the type when X, Y did not use a WH-type conjunction, but rather used a TH-type correlative conjunction. The WH-type conjunctions were used only as interrogative pronouns and indefinite pronouns. Similarly, WH forms were not used as relative pronouns. Instead, an indeclinable word was used, often in conjunction with the definite article. Orthography. Old Saxon comes down in a number of different manuscripts whose spelling systems sometimes differ markedly. In this section, only the letters used in normalized versions of the Helion will be kept, and the sounds modern scholars have traditionally assigned to these letters. Where spelling deviations in other texts may point to significant pronunciation variance, this will be indicated. In general, the spelling of Old Saxon corresponds quite well to that of the other ancient Germanic languages, such as Old High Germanic Gothic. C and K were both used for. However, it seems that, as in other West Germanic dialects, when was followed by I or E, it had the pronunciation TS or KS. The letters C and X were preferred for the palatalizations, K and even sometimes CH being rather used before U, O or A for K. G represented or xylophone, brenguen to bring, seguen to say, wej, way. G seems, at least in a few dialects, to have had the pronunciation or at the beginning of a word, only when followed by I or E. Thus we find Gia, ye, and even Ger, ye, the latter betraying a strong Old Frisian influence. H represents an itxalophone, holtwood, naht, night. I is used for both the vowels and the consonant, ik, I, yeah. QU and KW always represents quamin, they came. S represented, and between two vowels also. TH is used to indicate thoughten, they thought. TH is used for, occasionally also written DH. U represented the vowels and the consonant, which was usually written with B. UU was normally used to represent, predating the letter W. Z only appeared in a few texts due to Old High German influence. Text sample: a poetic version of the Lord's Prayer in the form of the traditional Germanic alliterative verses given in Old Saxon below as it appears in the Helion. Bibliography. Sources: Gallia, Johann Hendrik. Altsächsische Grammatik. Halle, Max Niemeyer. Lasch, Agath. Mittelniederdeutsche Grammatik. Halle, Max Niemeyer. General Euler, Wolfram. Das West Germanisch von der Herausbildung im 3. bis Uraufführung im 7. Jahrhundert, Analyse und Reconstruction. 244p. In German with English Summary, London, Berlin 2013, ISBN 978-3981211078. Rauch, Ermengarde. The Old Saxon Language. Berkeley Models of Grammar, Peter Lang Publishing. Ringe, Donald R. and Taylor, Tan. The Development of Old English, A Linguistic History of English, Volume 2, 632p. ISBN 978-0199207848. Oxford. Holthausen, Ferdinand. Altsächsisches Elementarbuch. Uland Press. Lexikons Tiefenbach, Heinrich. Altsächsisches Handwörterbuch, a concise Old Saxon dictionary. De Gruyter, Gerhard Koboler. Altsächsisches Wörterbuch 2000 ff. External History Robinson, Orrin W. Old English and its closest relatives. Stanford, Stanford University Press. Helfenstein, Jacob. Comparative Grammar of the Teutonic Languages. Oxford, Forgotten Books. Meidinger, Heinrich. Vergleichen etymologisches Wörterbuch der Gothisch-Teutonischen Mundarten. Uland Press. Shade, Oscar. Altdeutsches Lesbuch. Uland Press. Amen, Hermann. Repertorium der deutschen Sprache Gothisch, Althochdeutsch, Altsächsisch, Michigan, University of Michigan Library.